Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you this morning and to welcome three people that work very hard to make AI more trustfully and safely. So, our first guest speaker is Roberto Zicari. He is an affiliated professor in Helsinki, Finland, and adjunct professor at the Seoul National University in South Korea. He's also a visiting fellow at the Robert Schuman Center for Advanced Studies at the European University Institute. Roberto is also leading a team of international experts who define an assessment process for trustworthy AI called the inspection. And actually, this morning talk will be about this method. Previously, he was a professor of database and information system at the Goethe Institute in Frankfurt, Germany, where he founded the Frankfurt Big Data Lab. So as you can hear, he's an international recognized expert in the field of database and big data, and he's very interested to expand ethics and AI innovation and entrepreneurship. So I will give him like 30 minutes to present his method, and then we'll have two other conferences, Andréane Sabourin Laflamme and Frédérick Bruneault. So,
So good morning, everybody, and thank you for the very kind invitation for this possibility to explain where we've been working in the last 6 years. I'm very happy that I have two colleagues that have been working with us for a long time, Andréane and Frédérick. They will help on the French side for sure. So without any further delay, let me just go to. So the idea is to introduce our work on the trustworthy AI. The interesting thing is that I was invited when I was in Seoul to a conference organized by the UN Women, and I really like this quote that basically said, "Technology is not created in a vacuum," and it says it carries a value, perspective, and power structure of those who design it, which is quite really important. Here is an example. It's still taken from this conference, gender inequalities. And here's a quote. I'm using the quote later. That's why I'm using it here. As artificial intelligence continue to reshape how we live, work, and connect, we also risk deepening gender inequality, especially when women and marginalized community are left out of the conversation. This is one of the possible risks. I took this as an example. The interesting thing would be this last part of the sentence, left out of the conversation, whatever conversation means. So you might wonder, what kind of AI do we really wish to have? And if you look around, there's a number of, let's say, labels attached to AI: ethical AI, trustworthy AI, responsible AI. We even use mindful AI, inclusive AI, whatever you name it. So now, why are we working on that? So first of all, I'm not by myself, which is great because we've been working for a number of people. We are a non-commercial initiative, not even organized, which includes 100+ individual experts and 78 affiliated institutional labs in 40 countries all over the world. So there's quite a bit of people that have been working on that. And our mission is to try to help establish what we call a mindful use of AI. Very few people use that. Practically, if you look at our objective is, how do we assess trustworthy AI in practice? And our work started in more than 6 years ago, in January 2019. And the key result is a process that we call the inspection. There was a number of people co-authoring this process. And then it is a participatory process that is really helping skilled experts to assess a few things: the ethical, the technical, the domain-specific, and the legal implication of the use of an AI product or services within a given context. Now, this has been published in June 2021, so it's publicly available. There are a couple of decisions we made. First of all, we made the decision that this process is distributed under the terms and conditions of Creative Commons attribution, non-commercial, share alike. So non-commercial was a key decision. So basically everybody can use it, but not for commercial use. And the name is protected only to avoid that somebody is using it improperly and everything. So other than that, that's the only reason. So if you go back to the quotes that I mentioned at the very beginning, the interesting thing is in this quote is left out of the conversation. Now, the interesting thing is that what kind of conversation are we talking about here, and who should be part of a conversation? Now, if you're looking from an AI life cycle, you could simply say, well, there is somebody doing a design, somebody that is doing some development based on the design, likely incremental. Somebody at a certain point will deploy, and somebody might use it. And then maybe you can monitor if the use is proper. You can even decommission if something goes wrong. Now, if you see in these phases here, there are several, I would say, conversations that could happen, and several people could be or could not be part of that. For example, when you go from here to here and here, somebody has made a critical decision to decide to deploy and to use it. And who is this person? And how is this person making a decision if you're in a hospital, for example, and you are deploying and using AI in, for example, in radiology? Is this person an AI expert, or is just the radiologist that is making this decision? And who is actually designing and developing the AI? And who is actually checking if this is actually working properly? So all of these are conversations. And a wish would be to include a broader set of stakeholders in all stages of the life cycle. Now, this is not always possible, and sometimes not even desirable for a number of reasons. So what we did is we created teams that are interdisciplinary. And that's really a key part of our approach, because then it ensures a variety of viewpoints are expressed, either when you are helping engineers designing the system or assessing a system that has already been implemented and somebody is deciding to use it, or maybe they're already using it and you want to see if the effect of this use is what you want. The choice of experts that will work as the key ethical implication. So for you to know, we've been working using this process in basically two ways, either in assessing something that has already been designed, implemented, and in some cases even already deployed and used, or we've been using the process to help engineers and other people in design phase. So well before it's actually deployed and used. Now, we assemble a team external to whoever is either designing or using it. And depending on the use case and domain, the team might include this list: ethicist, domain specialist, legal scholar, social scientists, AI engineers, and maybe end user or patient, whatever. I put a little mark here because the role of ethicist is really key And a little remark and lesson learned that who are these ethicists? Well, many people are actually nowadays claiming to be ethicists. What we really need is applied ethics. So people that have a strong background in ethics and they're sincerely interested in applying the concept that they know, the specific use case, a specific case. That it works very well. We don't need generalists that are talking about general concept. Our approach is holistic. And what do I mean with that? We really don't like very much monolithic and statical checklist. I'll explain it with an example afterwards. But basically, our approach in a nutshell has the following component. We use social technical scenarios. We use a framework of claims, argument, and evidence to develop an evidence base. And then we identify ethical tension and trade-off. And interesting, we do a mapping to a framework, of ethical framework of your choice, and we give recommendations. So we're not an entity that can give you a stamp or certify anybody, we're just simply doing recommendation. The process, I don't have the time to go in great detail, but basically has three parts. The first part where you set the team and some precondition, for example, conflict of interest. The boundaries are very important because you might end up assessing something and then you have no idea about the boundaries. So you don't want to assess the entire hospital, or maybe you discover that what you're doing in the radiology department has an implication on the accounting department or on the insurance that is not even the hospital. So that has to be very clear. And the assessment really is using these elements that I will now explain you, the social technical scenario, the claim and arguments and evidence, and the mapping. And then we resolve, if possible, or at least ethical tension and trade-off, and give a recommendation. Now, this could also be used when you do design. So our process can be considered like an ethical aligned AI code design. The most interesting thing that we learn, because that's really an incremental thing, when an engineer comes and says, oh, I have an idea. This is the aim of my system. It will help, I don't know, radiologists to do this and this and that. I think the most original thing in this approach is to consider this, oh, it will do this and that as a claim. And basically ask for evidence. So, and basically turning the decision of the aim as an open one. So they need to be reviewed and kind of double check. It's really surprising because I'm an engineer. We are not educated in anything that has to do with ethics or legal and even a domain. So we've been using one framework, which is the one that the EU has developed already a few years ago. It's called Trustworthy AI. And as you probably all know, it has 4 ethical principles. Some of them are obvious. The last one here, they invented this name just to figure it out that there are some difficulty to look at inside. And there are obviously tension about that. And then they went through requirements and sub-requirements. So there are 7 requirements and sub-requirements that's supposed to be used in the entire life cycle. But you can use our process for anything else. If you feel like you want to use it for framework that are in different area, in geographical area, then it's fine, because you see that we are kind of agnostic. We start with something called social technical scenario that are well known in social science. And the idea, then you ask a couple of questions. What is the aim of the system? Who are the actors? The expectation, the interaction, how this AI will influence the processes and decision, what is the technology. And basically by asking questions, receiving or not receiving questions, you identify certain issues that could be potentially risk. They need to be assessed. How do you assess? Here it comes, this really interesting framework that we didn't invent, but it was basically used already in the industry for all kinds of other technology, like nuclear technology or something like that. It's called claims, argument, and evidence. And basically, you look for claims. A claim is an assertion that is being made, and then you wonder, well, okay, how do I do with this? For example, this AI system is very accurate, 90% accurate, or this system will improve something or will save something. Right? These are all claims. And then we ask, what is the evidence that you can support about all of these claims? And of course, you know, source of evidence is really tricky because it might include the design, the peer review work, if it's something in science, or some benchmarking, or whatever that has some evidence that you can present. And it doesn't mean that the evidence is actually quite consistent. You might have the expert that bring in contradictory evidence, and then you start having a conversation. And this is the arguments part, where you basically say, okay, let's look at all of this evidence here and the claim and try to figure it out whether we can convince the expert if this is actually sustained. If not, a claim becomes an issue for us. And this is really what we call developing an evidence base, which is interesting because, you know, it has to do with different background. If you have in the team legal scholars, social scientists, domain experts, ethicists, or engineers, they talk different languages, and you need to kind of end up building an evidence using social technical scenario and looking at claims and looking at evidence and figure it out whether any issues there. So once you find an issue, so a claim that has no evidence, or at least you did not agree on the evidence, becomes potentially a risk. We don't call it risk, we call it issues because it's not necessarily clear that this is a risk. And you describe it in open text, so that's called open vocabulary. So I skipped that part because I don't have the time, but if you want to see, there's a very interesting paper written in 2019 from the Nothing Foundation that gives some kind of theoretical background of this building evidence. You know, concept building is one of the terms. And then ethical tension and trade-off are asked for by the EU, for example, in their own guidelines. So you need to figure it out, okay, what are these tensions and how do you find tension? So also here, we don't really look at tension in general sense. We look at the tension of value in technological applications, or specific on the use case. Now, here is a lesson learned. You have maybe 20 people. Let's say 2/3 are not ethicists or even more, and they have absolutely no idea what an ethical tension is. So what do we do with that? Oh, okay. So we figure it out. Maybe we can help them by giving them a predefined catalog of possible examples. Not given, you know, it was already suggested by this paper, but you give them a list like this one here. And interesting enough, if you see things like accuracy and fairness, people might have a kind of understanding. But when you start seeing things like convenience and dignity, you lost half of the people. Personalization versus solidarity, you lost them all, because people have not really the background to really take this and having a concept that is rooted in ethics. So that's why it's important that the ethicists that are around are helping these people to explain what this thing is about. Now, shall we use checklists for doing this work? Well, we really don't think it's very useful to use checklists. Here is an example, just, you know, hypothetical example. Suppose that, you know, we're working in healthcare and the task is to verify if we are having a classical case of ethical tension, namely the first one, accuracy versus fairness. What if our system is in healthcare, the outcome is most accurate on the average, but systematically discriminate against a specific minority? For example, that's the quote at the very beginning. Now, if you look at the, for example, work of the EU, they give you a checklist. Many people have checklists, and the checklist normally looks like this. You know, does the AI system potentially negatively discriminate against people? on the basis of any of the following grounds. And then you have a long list of possible reasons why the system is discriminating. And this basically means that you need to verify one of these conditions, one of the requirements of trustworthiness, which is number 5, which is diversity, non-discrimination, fairness. And this is literally what they write, what they want. They don't want any of this. You know, direct prejudice, discrimination. This is what they don't want, but they don't tell you how to do it. So the challenge of a checklist is they're general, they're not specific to any domain. They don't give you any information on what fairness means in this particular case, in this particular domain. And in fact, if you think about fairness, and it's not me to tell you, you can see in various ways from the philosophical social science way, you can see from, for example, in this case, from the healthcare perspective, or if you're a machine learning engineer, they're going to give you a bunch of numbers, and that's fairness for them. And then you're left to decide if the system is actually discriminating or not. So as you can see, you need people to work on it and discuss. In order to move forward and have more, for example, possibility to look around the tension, you can look at how the system is not only looking and working right now, but how it's impacting maybe the future. For example, short-term versus long-term. Maybe now it's working pretty well, but in the long term, maybe it's endangering something. Or if it's unbalancing some power, like winners versus losers. Maybe at the end of the day, a few people will benefit and some majority will lose. Or if you use it locally, it works very well, but if you start exporting it, it might end up being so biased that it might not work very well. So these are all things that we give. And we also give them a classification of dilemma, again, taken by this paper, to tell people that sometimes you really have an ethical dilemma, and our ethicists will help on that. But most of the cases is not really there, and you need to figure it out whether you have enough information, or maybe you simply don't have an ethical dilemma, and you have a solution. So, to conclude, and this is the most interesting thing about the talk, I believe, is how do we reach consensus? So you have a bunch of issues that lots of people with different backgrounds have discovered, and now you have to describe what that really means in terms of the framework. Now let's assume that you work with the U framework, with the 4 ethical principles, 7 requirements, sub-requirements. Then what we do, we go from an open description of the issue into mapping the issue into this framework. You go to a closed vocabulary, and then you rank it by importance. So this really is important, because then all of a sudden you have people with completely different background. They will need to force themselves, especially philosophers, to map whatever general concept into the specific. It's an interesting exercise. And here how we do the mapping. So you start with something that is a free text, and then you start thinking, how do I map it to this ethical principle? Could be more than one. And then if you're using the U, how do I map it to maybe the requirements? And what it comes up is something, I take an example from a best practice that we did back in 21 on in healthcare. Here it looks like this. You describe the issue with a name. Here it's very technical, so I don't even have to explain, but there was something fairness in training data. You see, we're talking about fairness. And then we have a descriptive description of this issue that is an open vocabulary. As you can see, is English, plain English. They say, well, basically, if you use this system, the system's been trained using people speaking Danish, but if somebody does not speak Danish or speak a dialect, the system will be biased, and then you have a problem. So that's the bottom line of this descriptive part. But that doesn't tell you anything about what is actually the ethical problem that you might think. So then the mapping is when people will say, okay, let me force this issue to be mapped on something. For example, this could be mapped on the ethical principle of fairness, And the sub-requirements of diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness, exactly as we were discussing before. And there's even sub-requirements for that. It's called avoidance of unfair bias. You can even map an issue to more than one ethical principle. For example, this very technical open vocabulary description is mapped to two ethical requirements, accountability and transparency, and then you have the sub-requirement as well. Now, you might wonder, well, what do we learn from that? We learned that if you focus only on the four ethical principles, the mapping is too general, it doesn't specify. Good to map on the requirements. If you go even to sub-requirements, it get very messy and it's very complicated. So the challenge is that obviously there's a number of ambiguity because the people doing this mapping and people have different opinions. They might disagree. That's why this mapping becomes a consensus-based process because they need to agree on where to map whatever they think is an issue. And of course, it's debatable because people have a background, people have personality, people have bias. So, but nevertheless, basically what we end up, and that's my last slide, when we are done there, we can say, hey, guys, there is an issue in fairness, and there is an issue on this particular thing, which is the training data is biased. Do something about it. And then you can give a recommendation. The recommendation, depending on if you are working with designer, they can take into account and maybe change the design or change the implementation, hopefully. Or if the system has already been implemented and you have absolutely no access to the system, whoever is using it or decide to use it could decide whether this system has too much risk and you don't want to use it, or maybe you could say, I can live with this risk and I'm good with that. I was asked to be in time on 30 minutes. I think I'm in time for 30 minutes so that I give also a space to my two colleagues and also space for any question that you might have.
Thank you so much. Actually, you did super well on time. We're even ahead of the schedule. So this is...
I stopped the sharing then. Okay.
Yes, this is very much appreciated. So thank you so much for this clear and comprehensive introduction to your work you're doing and carry on with your team of experts from different domain and fields. So what we will do right now is I'll leave the floor to Andréane and Frédérick, who had been involved and worked with that method. So I think they can give more practical and insight about how it was and how it worked. And for the presentation, I will just leave up to them to introduce themselves. So you can, and we'll have 15 minutes with them.
All right. Thank you, Emmanuel. So hi, I'm Frédérick Bruneault. So I'm teaching philosophy at here in Montreal, Cégep André Laurando. I'm also adjunct professor at École des médias in UQAM. And with Andréane, we co-founded and we're working at the LENIA, Laboratoire d'éthique du numérique et de l'IA, donc AI and Digital Ethics Lab. So we've been working with, I'll go straight to, Andréane, you can introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Frédérick. So same here. I'm also a philosophy professor at Cégep André Laurando, and I'm also a doctoral candidate at the Faculty of Law at University of Sherbrooke. And so, yeah, we co-founded this this digital and AI ethics lab at Cégep André Laurando. That's been actually affiliated with the Z-inspection process since, I think, if I remember correctly, it's 2021, right? And so I also act as a service officer for Z-inspection, and I'm also the head of education for Canada. And I'll be speaking today about the pilot project that I'm coordinating right now using the Z-inspection method to assess the use of this method to assess the use of AI in higher education at the University of Toronto.
Yeah, thank you. But I'll go first, and actually I'll say it right away. My contribution to that is pretty modest. and I'm here more as a witness than anything else. Actually, I was contacted by Roberto a few years ago already, and I was involved in the process, not at the beginning, but 2020 was the pandemic, and I participated in at least four use cases. So we had the emergency calls, dermatology, the cardiac arrest, and the three AI, actually healthcare related use cases. And then we did the one in the Netherlands, which was not related to healthcare. It was related to the vegetation and so the monitoring of the fields in the Netherlands. And I won't talk about all those use cases, but I'll try to, as a witness and a participant in that, to explain just what Roberto just talked about. Actually, the process is very specific and very special. You put together a group of, it depends, 10 or 20, sometimes we were almost 30 persons online, and we gather together with, we come from, as Roberto said, different fields, ethics, social sciences, domain specific, so dermatology when it is, or emergency calls, or whatever, people in data science and IT and everything, people that are not used to talk together usually, and we focus on that use case. So it is a process where we get exposed to the use case, and then using the process. And I want to draw attention to the idea of social technical scenarios. This is really something that appears to be specific and special. Actually, we hear what is the project or how the AI system is used. So Roberto said sometimes it's post-hoc, sometimes it's ante, and then we think about all of this, and then we try to put forward what we call social technical scenarios. So how is the system used? How can it be used? And how are the different ways we could use it in the future? And what are the different, ramifications or different ways it could be used, or it could lead to something? And then start on that basis. We try to map the different tensions and the different the claims. We identify the claims, and then we look for evidence and map the different tensions. And this process is, I want to say it, it's pretty humbling actually, because you need to interact with different people from different fields, and most of the time the group was large enough so that we could create subgroups, so that ethical ethicists and legal experts and everything, we could gather together in a subgroup to discuss different things, and then we come back to the larger group in the discussion on the internet. But we also worked on text, online text with comments, and then interact and made some changes in the text. So the whole process is not, as Roberto said, to give a stamp of approval or something like that, but it's really to trying to think through all the different possible uses, and trying to take time to identify all the different issues that might arise in the different, and it takes time, and it takes a lot of thinking, and take the time to do that, and that experience was very helpful, I think, and the back, what we get from people. Actually, one thing I didn't say that it's really important. It takes also a lot of willingness from the people who are designing and using the AI systems, because we often have questions, because is it really working like that? what are the numbers or the data, or you claim it does something, but how does it do that? So we constantly have an exchange with people. They're not directly involved, but they're always there to answer the questions we have. And the whole process is, the idea is to go through as as holistically as possible all the different scenarios you can think of and all the different issues using different frameworks. Roberto said we've been using mainly the EU guidelines, but it could be done with another framework. But when you look at, for example, the EU guidelines, it gives a general idea of the different issues and different problems or tensions you could identify. And then you say, okay, if you use that, how can we go through that and make sure that we don't forget anything, and make sure that we've been digging so that nothing is left, hopefully, and then come up with recommendations at the end, so that people could just use those recommendations to improve the system. So that's the general idea of the whole process, and using what Roberto has described as better than me. I think we've done that, and I'll let Andréane speak about one specific use case, which is the University of Toronto.
Thank you so much, Frédérick. You guys are so great. You're keeping up the time so well. So thank you so much. So Andréane, will be your turn, please.
Yes, perfect. I'm just going to be sharing my screen. Can you see my screen correctly? Yeah. Okay. So thank
Yes.
you, Frédérick. So I'll be really brief because I want to leave some time for questions. But what I'll be talking about now is one pilot that I'm coordinating with, as you can see on the screen, University of Toronto. It's the Dalla Lana School of Public Health. As Frédérick and Roberto said, the Z-inspection method has been used in healthcare, also in environment, but in the higher education sector, this would be the first time. So basically, the idea with this project is to study or assess the use of of AI in higher education to accompany students and professors when grading and writing essays. As you know, AI has been used more and more in higher education, and it raises a lot of ethical issues. And the University of Toronto, more specifically the Masters of Health Informatics, they wanted to think about acquiring one system so their professors and instructors could use the system in order to evaluate their student assessments and work. But as you can imagine, there are a lot of ethical issues related to this kind of use. And they wanted, before taking the decision to acquire the system, they wanted to use the inspection process in order to identify the potential risks and the potential also issues, and in order to make sure that they're doing things correctly. So the Masters of Health Informatics, they train basically students to use technology and AI in the healthcare system. And they are actually, what's particular about this pilot project is sort of a twofold project. The Masters of Health Informatics on their side are also they're actually conducting a pilot project. They are having teachers and instructors using the system in a very small scale. And we, on our side, with the inspection expert group, we are having their feedback, and we're using actually this feedback in order to conduct our assessment. So this is sort of something that is particular about this project. It's a very much smaller scale, I have to say, than other pilots that have been conducted before. As you can see, the team here is a bit smaller. It has its upsides, but also its challenges. But basically, it's still we have a multidisciplinary team as required by the inspection process. We have people in ethics, philosophy, health informatics, computer science, human rights, information science, and education. So I think even we have a smaller group, we have a good representation of different expertise. So basically, just to give you an idea, and I don't want to go into details here, but the type of system that we're looking at are these types of systems that the instructors could use AI to assess, to evaluate student papers. And what these kinds of systems, this is one example. There are many more on the markets right now. These kind of systems, Roberto said earlier, what they have in mind is their claims, what they claim that the system will do. They claim that it's going to be saving time. They claim that the system is 100%, as you can see, unbiased. They claim that the teachers will be able to save time and spend time with their students on other things. They claim also that it's going to be able to reduce capital, which has, as you can imagine, its issues. So what we have tried to so far is to assess the ethical issues related to specifically these types of systems that are used to evaluate student work. Just to make a little precision, as Roberto said, this inspection process can take place at many stages. Here, what's particular in this project is it's before the use or implementation. The university, the Masters of Health Informatics has not decided yet if they're going to be using the system, how they're going to be implementing it. So it's really a before, and this process will help them make their decision, and maybe even they will this is what we hope it will have as an effect. It will help them to build an AI governance framework for the use of AI in their department, but even for the whole university. So you recognize here this image. This is where we are sort of at. We have done the setup phase. We have analyzed the social technical scenarios. We are almost done identifying the ethical issues and tensions, and the next phase is to identify the issues to the frameworks that we'll be using. What's particular about this project, as Roberto said before, is that we can use different frameworks. We decided, for sake of continuity with other assessments, we have decided to use the EU guidelines for trustworthy AI. It's a very interesting and it has proven very helpful document in the past. So we have decided to use it. But the thing is that it's starting to date a little because that it has been published in 2019 before ChatGPT and generative AI. So we decided to use two documents here in a combination. We are using the UNESCO document, the Guidance for Generative AI in Education and Research, which has the advantage of being more recent and more focused on specifically generative AI. And also, it's also focused on really the issues related to education, as you can see. So this is a particular aspect of our project, is that we're doing an assessment with these two frameworks in combination, and it has been proven very enriching so far. So I don't want to take too much time, but what is still left to do? We have been meeting more or less once a month, once every 2 months, more or less, in the past year and a half. So it's a long process. It's not necessarily something you can do overnight. It's not a checklist. A lot of discussions, a lot of also things to set regarding to the methodology, how we're going to organize ourselves, the platforms we're using. These are really things that take time, and I think it's normal. And they're not on a rush to the University of Toronto. They want to do things correctly. So basically, the next steps will be to finish the mapping to the requirements and to the other frameworks, the other UNESCO frameworks, to identify tensions, to make recommendation, and as the other assessments and pilots have been aiming at, the objective is to publish a paper about the process and also about the recommendation. So I will stop here, but if you have any other question, please don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you so much, Andréane. So this is the time for questions. I see there's already Daniela who wrote a few questions in the chat. I'm not sure if I can address all of them, but please feel free to write your questions, even in French or in English, as you wish. We can translate if you need. So I'll start with Daniela's first set of questions. So I'll read it all. What I've observed with other frameworks is that the impact population, such as citizen, user, people that are not in the AI domain, have challenged imagine all risk before the implementation. Some of those risks become rooted in the process and are difficult to mitigate after implementation. Have you observed that as well? And does the Z inspection suggest a way to overcome this issue?
I can thank you for the question. I can start, and then Andréane and Frédérick, if you want to chime in, it's good. This is a very interesting question because it really asks who should be involved in either design or who should be involved in deciding to use, or who should be involved in monitoring something that is taking care. So these are different areas. And they're very different because if you're lucky enough and you can work with engineers, that basically means that whoever is doing the system should allow external people to have an eye on what they do. That's why we are non-commercial. So we end up not working directly with vendors. So because there's a conflict of interest already there. But let's assume that you are working with the government or with the research organization, and you're likely to be working together with scientists or AI engineers. We just did this. I was in Korea and we were working on something on predicting diabetes too. So who should be there? For example, if you're working with the tool in healthcare, are we involving representative of patient in the code design? And the answer is really depending on what is the system. So if the system, for example, is predicting the risk of that you will have a diabetes too when you get old, maybe having a representative of people who have experienced diabetes too is extremely important because it will give you a completely different viewpoints. Oh, this system is totally unmanageable for normal people. I cannot even think about it. Or if my doctor will basically say, hey, the system has mentioned that you might have diabetes, I would freak out and something like that. So this is one. Frédérick was mentioning the case that we did with the government in the Netherlands and one of the provinces there. And at a certain point, this system was implemented by a third party, so we have no access to the system ourselves. But at a certain point, there was a discussion whether, because the system has to do with unwanted species of grass. So what's the deal? The deal is that when you have unwanted species of grass, you have pollution. Oh, okay. So you have EU recommendation, actually guidelines, saying, well, you shouldn't have that. So, and who is producing pollution? Well, in the Netherlands, among other things, farmers, agriculture are a source of possible pollution, nitrogen or something like that. Major political thing. So we decided not to have farmers part of our system, but it's a quite debatable decision because on one end, you don't include people who have absolutely no idea what's going on. But at a certain point, and if you include people that are into a highly political tension, they might end up bringing their own, let's say, viewpoints, a kind of lobby inside a neutral group. So it's a very interesting question what you pose. For example, are citizens supposed to be part of decision making when they have absolutely no idea, but they have some fear? So this is a something that we experienced, but we didn't really come up with the clear guidelines, and I don't think we have clear lesson learned on that. So that's actually my take on this. Very difficult question, by the way.
Yeah, but a very nuanced answer. And I mean, those questions are more like rooted into philosophy. How do you organize a dialogue between people? And is everybody like Habermas work on that? Like is everybody able to use like the basic for dialogue? And anyway, so I think you did a pretty good job. Perhaps we have time for one last question, and I think it can end our webinar very well. It's from Daniela again, and she said, how can someone gain the necessary knowledge and skills to learn a Z inspection?
Oh, I leave Andréane to answer because she's our head of education in Canada. So I think maybe you are the best person to answer this question.
Sure, I can do that. Thank you, Roberto. Well, I guess first of all, it's really important to know the process really well because, as you can see, it's a very defined process. Even if there are interpretation and you can apply it differently in different situations, I think there are essential stages. For example, at the beginning, you really need to make sure that all the people around the table don't have a conflict of interest, that they're not involved in the inspection to gain anything. So it's really important to do that. For me, I'm also an ethicist. I'm also a philosopher, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. As long as you have ethicists on board, I've seen many inspection pilot process conducted by people that were not philosophers, but that had this very important sensitivity toward issues. That's what you need. The experts are there for that. So it's basically about the coordination to know. So to answer shortly, like to know really well the process, to have also a knowledge of the theoretical framework that supports the process. That I think is very important, but not necessarily to have an extensive background in ethics because you will have people on board necessarily who have that background. So yeah, that's how I could answer that question.
If I can,
Uh,
I
yes,
could
of course, please.
just add that I would say maybe just to end up this. For me, it's not about. Yeah, of course, you need to know the process and everything. It just as Andréane just said, but I would just add to that it's more about know-how than knowledge or a knowledge set. Actually, it is. I would say Roberto talked earlier about mindful use of AI, but it's also a mindful assessment of the use of AI. You need to be in the general. Attitude of openness and trying to see, and it answers the other question actually, because you try to make a group of people so that will have the larger view on the system. Of course, it's never perfect, but it is, as I've seen it, probably one of the most or the most large set of way of doing things so that you could include the more viewpoints and pretty humbling and it's pretty useful and you need to be in that set of mind so that you could expose yourself to different viewpoints and different domains and ways of doing things, methods and everything in order to get the more mindful viewpoint as a group on the AI system. That's how I would describe it. I don't know if I'm wrong.
Maybe if I can add practically for the person who asked, we do have a set of, let's say, teaching slides that are online. So we'll be happy to send you the link so you can have a look. You know, there's an entire series of lectures on there. So if somebody wants to know more about all the details, and then a bunch of papers that also we publish.
Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. I think it was a very dynamic and thoughtful presentation. So thanks particularly to Roberto who made it, but also Andréane and Frédérick who sort of put their experience of the method into place as well. So it was a very interesting and nice way to start the day because for here in Quebec, it's the morning. So, and thanks for everyone for attending this webinar. Thanks for your questions. And of course, thanks for Le Via to make this possible and for their support. So I wish you all a good day and enjoy the rest of it. Bye-bye.
Thank you for the invitation. Bye then.
You're
Thank
more
you.
than
Thank
welcome.
you.
Everyone.
Merci.
Bye.
Merci. Bonne journée.
Bye.